Hi, everyone. This is Donna Druchunas, and I am going to do a Procreate and Tech Tips session here with the Sequential Artist Workshop, and we're going to talk about Procreate and Tech Tips making stamp brushes. So the first thing we'll start with, before I say that is I made a handout to go with this session, and it will be posted a link in the notes with the video, but it's also, if you're on the Mighty Network now, before we recorded, it's in the announcement for this this talk. But I made a handout so you can go back over the steps that I said with your reading skills later. So yes, you don't need to look at it now while we're going through this. So first thing I'm going to go through is a little overview, and these are the steps we're going to do. We're going to find out what a stamp brush is, and then we're going to make a square canvas and create a shape. We're going to find out how we can add texture to a stamp brush, because these are almost the same brush. One is without texture, one is with texture. And we're going to look at other options that you can adjust on your brush to make it do different fun things, like not always be the same size, or turn around backwards and forwards, or other things. So I'll show you those step by step as we do it. But we're going to start first with what is a stamp brush. So here's a canvas that I made. Someone's got an echo going on. Am I sounding okay to you guys? You don't hear an echo?
You sound good now.
Okay.
The echo's gone.
Here's a canvas I made that has some little drawings on it. A leaf, a bird, a demon, a symbol. And I made brushes so that I can just tap and draw that. I don't have to draw it over from scratch. Now, a regular brush, I'm going to go in my favorite brushes, and syrup brush I use a lot. A regular brush you use to draw or paint with, right? So you're either making lines or shapes that you make up as you go, coloring. A stamp brush, see, instead of a line showing you the line you're going to draw with the brush, the stamp brush shows you a picture. And when you select that brush and tap on your page, that whole picture shows up. It can be any color, it can be different sizes and all kinds of things. But that way, say I'm going to draw a tree with 400 oak leaves on it, I don't have to draw all of the oak leaves. I can use a stamp brush and tap around or draw around and add a bunch of oak leaves. Now that one might not be the best for filling in a whole tree, but we'll look at some different options. So that's all a stamp brush is. It can be anything as simple as just a circle. When I tap, I get a perfect circle. I can change the size and everything just like a regular brush. And it can be as complicated as anything you want it to be. But you usually use it just by touching once, as if it was a rubber stamp or a wooden stamp that you put ink on and press down on your paper. So that's what a stamp brush is. Okay, so the first thing you need to do to make a stamp brush is draw your shape that you're going to make the brush up. And, you know, like I said, it can be anything. We're going to draw the castle. But the rules for drawing the shape for a stamp brush is you use pure black for your ink color. You use a white background. And if you want to add more details to your brush, you make them white. And then we'll talk about how do you pick a brush to make your stamps with. Okay, so this is, as I said, a square canvas, and it's got a brush I already drew in it. What I actually started with was a little painting that I imported from something else. And I said, because I wanted to make my stamp the same basic shape as this piece of a painting. Of course, you can start with a blank canvas if you want. I like to pick a brush. First, we'll pick solid black. So either drag all the way to the bottom left corner on the classic, or on the disc, you double tap in this corner, you get solid black. We'll pick that for our color. And I'm going to stick with the syrup brush. Basically, you want to pick a brush that is solid, that's going to give you solid black. Something like a gouache brush, it gives you shades of gray. So you don't want that. You can use any brush that's a solid black. So you can pick, you can decide just by the style of your drawing if you want something with smooth outlines or rough outlines. So long as it's going to give you a solid black line, you're good. So going with the syrup brush, what I did was I just went, and I like my stamps to be a little bit wonky. I don't want them to look totally geometric. But of course, if you want totally straight lines, you can press and hold. If I did this and then hold, it straightens out all the corners and the lines. Just like if you want to draw a straight line, click and hold. If you want to draw straighten out any kind of zigzaggy line, click and hold at the end. Super wonky. Well, I want my castle to be taller than that, so I'm going to add a bottom to it. So there's my outline and my shape, and then I just click the black up here in the corner and drag it to fill the shapes. Whoops, didn't fill all the way. You know why? Because I drew on my same layer that I had my sketch on. So as I said, drawing on the wrong layer is like my most common mistake. So we want to draw our thing on its own layer. I don't know, every single thing I draw on Procreate, at least once I draw something on the wrong layer. Then I can drag this in and fill the shape. So I can delete or turn off that other layer, and that would be the shape of my stamp brush. This is the one I actually did. So I made it straighter, but you can see it's still wonky. It's not all right angles. You can make this as wonky or as precise as your drawing style is. All that matters is you drew something that has sharp edges and all solid black. Now, if I want to have more details on my castle, I can erase stuff, or I can add another layer and draw with white, pure white. The key is you want to have pure white and pure black. And the second key is knowing how big you're going to use your stamp brush. You know, I use my stamp brushes, you know, anywhere from like 1/4 of an inch to an inch or 2 inches in size. So I don't want to make something that if I go like really small like that, I can't see my lines because I made my lines too thin. So you want to zoom in and out and see what your stamp looks like at different sizes. And that's all there is to it. You use a square canvas. I use 3000 by 3000 pixels, and I'll show you why. Because when I go here to make a new canvas and it says square, it's 3000 by 3000 pixels. I've just always used that because that's the size my iPad gave me. There's no reasoning behind it, except it's worked well for the brushes, stamp brushes that I've made. And I had plenty of pixels. So 3000 by 3000 pixels, if you wanted to say print this at 300 DPI, you could get 10 by 10 inches. So that's a pretty big canvas for drawing something that we're going to make into a stamp brush that we're probably going to be using, you know, less than an inch or a couple of inches in size. It's really good.
Can I
So
ask
you get, yes, go ahead. Question?
In your regular brush library, is there a stamp brush that you're building on, or do you have to import something to start this?
I am going to go over that.
Okay.
There are some in there, but I don't know what they are. And in the handout, I have a link to a stamp brush, circle stamp brush that you can download and use. Anyhow, after you draw it, is that okay? Answer the question?
Yes.
Okay. There are stamp brushes that come with Procreate. I just don't offhand know which ones they are. Anyhow, after you finish your drawing, you want to do share, and you can do that while you still have your drawing open, or you can do it from this gallery. I can swipe to the left and click share, and I use a JPEG. And I just click save image. So I'm just saving this to the photos on my iPad. So that's it for making the drawing that we're going to use for our stamp brush. So that's the first step, is to make the drawing. So the second step is to make the brush. So there's many ways you can do this, but I usually duplicate a brush, which is what you were just asking about. Is there a stamp brush in Procreate you can use to duplicate? I usually duplicate a brush that's already a stamp brush and then edit the shape. And that's what we're going to do next. So it's going to look something like this. Okay. So this is we're going to go into the brush studio, click shape and edit it. I'm going to clear this. So we have a blank one, and then we're going to make a new brush and draw with it. So I have all my stamp brushes collected in a folder. And you can pick any one to start with to duplicate. But for now, we'll just do a circle. Doesn't really matter what it is. I always duplicate it first. That way I still have the circle left as its own brush. Okay, so you duplicate it and then tap it again. So the brush studio opens up. So we're just going to go through the first step, which is changing the shape. In the brush studio menu on the left, you just go down to shape and click that or tap it. And then it shows you the shape in a big picture. And above that, it has a thing that says edit.
Donna,
That brings up the shape editor.
Donna,
Yes.
how do I get into Brush Studio if I
Yep.
I don't have I can't find stamps on here to duplicate.
Right. No,
something?
these are stamps that I gathered together. So you duplicate a brush.
Any brush?
Any brush. I like to start with a brush that's already a stamp brush. And I was trying to think of what Procreate came with that was already a stamp brush. Maybe this blotch in water. That's a stamp brush. So under the water section, you can duplicate the blotch brush.
Okay.
Okay. And then when the brush is highlighted, your duplicate, when you tap it again, the brush studio opens. Okay.
How come it's, oh, there we go. Okay, got it.
So now we're going to go to the shape. And instead of having this messy shape, we're going to click edit. And we're going to click import on the upper right. And we're going to pick import a photo because I saved my shape to my photos. So import a photo, and there's my castle. So I'm just going to tap it, and there's my shape. Now, because I drew black on white, this is not going to work right it's not ready for the brush. So the last thing you have to do is tap it with 2 fingers so it turns to be white on black. You can draw it white on black to start with, but I find that harder to draw. I find it much easier to draw, it's more natural to draw with a black pen on a white paper. And then all you have to do is tap it with 2 fingers to switch the white and black in the brush studio. So I imported it. I said, import a photo. I picked my castle, and then I tapped it with 2 fingers to turn it so the background is black, and then I click done. And now my brush is a castle.
Oh,
So I can
wait.
click done, and my brush is a castle.
Okay, so how did you change the background to
Uh-huh.
black?
You touch on we'll go in the brush. We're in the brush. We're in edit shape. So it says shape editor. You touch it with 2 fingers and it
Oh, okay.
changes the colors.
Got it.
And then you say done. And you have the brush. Now, in this case, because the brush we started with the blotch brush is made to go in different directions every time you use it, that's what's happening with the castle. If I had used a different brush to start with that was always right side up, the castle would be always right side up. Don't worry about that for right now, because the next thing we're going to do is look at how to change all these things that can happen with it. But now you know how to draw a shape on a square canvas using black and white, and how to duplicate a stamp brush and change the shape. So that's all we were going to do in that step. That's the first thing you do. Then there's other things you can do to the stamp brush, like adding texture. And there's textures built in Procreate. We'll look at how to do that. If you wanted to add textures to your brush, instead of having it flat black, you could have a brick texture on it. And we're going to look at the other options, like what direction is the castle standing in? If it's a leaf, it's okay if it comes out in a different direction every time, because leaves do that. But a castle should be standing up probably every time we make the stamp. You can change the opacity of your brush in the regular brush settings, or permanently in the brush studio. You can do things with the size and all kinds of crazy things like that. So let's do the texture first. Again, I'm going to delete that, turn off that layer, put on a blank layer, and I'm going to stamp a couple of castles. And again, the blotch brush we started with was turning directions. That's why the castle is. We will look at how to stop that. But the next step I want to show you is adding a texture. So we're in our brushes. There's my castle brush. I'm going to duplicate it so that way I can have a castle brush just like the one I made, and a different one with texture. So again, when I have the new castle brush highlighted, I touch it again, it brings up the brush studio. We're going to go down. Underneath shape is a thing called grain. Right now, there's nothing in the grain of this one, so this is just nice and smooth and solid. But I can click edit, just like I clicked edit on the shape. I click edit on the grain. It gives me the grain editor. And here's the cool thing here is when I say import, if I have some photos, I can use them, but Procreate has a bunch already. So if you pick source library, it shows you all these textures that you can use for whatever. In this case, for a stamp brush. So, we could say that looks sort of like stones and bricks to me. It's showing you a little thumbnail. Here it's showing it blown up. Let's see what that does. So I picked it, I brought it in, I clicked done. And now, well, look at that. Something didn't like that, or it didn't do anything much. Let's try a different one. Whoops. Source library. Let's pick this one. There we go. Now it's I don't know if you can see it really well, but it's not solid black. It's a little blotchy. The other grain was too light to really show up in this particular brush. So when I went back and picked the darker one, it shows up more. Let me show you again. We'll edit again. We'll import from the source library, and let's pick like a really dark one. That one's really dark. Got more black areas in it. You can also do the 2-tap on the texture to change it black and white and reverse, just like you did on the shape. So when I do that one, now you can really see texture in that castle. And when I go here and make a castle with this brush now, I mean, you can really see the difference, solid black texture. So you can do that with any stamp brush, adding texture, which is really cool because it makes it look more like a real stamp. Like if you're not doing really carefully, you know, I'm always doing things too fast, and you put the ink on a stamp and you press it, it almost never comes out really solid. There's always some kind of texture on it from the material that you're working with. So that's kind of fun. You can add textures. So yeah, so just to remember, we started with the square canvas, which when you go to the plus sign in your gallery is one of the choices that you have. So we started with a square canvas. We did drawing a shape in it with black on a white background. So black and white with a brush that makes pure black. Then we duplicated a stamp brush and edited the shape to create the initial brush. And then we went in and added grain to create texture. And we use the built-in options in the library that comes with Procreate, but you can use any grayscale black, grayscale black and white image that you want for grain. So if you have taken a picture of a piece of paper or a piece of granite or anything like that, change it to a black and white photo on your phone, and then you can use it for the grain. Okay, we're still stuck with the brush that turns all around, right? Our castle brush is not standing on the ground. So what we want to do is look at how to change the direction, the opacity, and so forth. So we're going to look at some of the other things in this menu, like dynamics and Apple Pencil and properties. So let's look at dynamics first. So here's what that screen will look like. And turn off that layer, put an empty layer to draw on. We'll go back into our castle brush. And before we look at dynamics, I want to look at stroke path. It has this thing called jitter, which makes things move around. That's what's making the castle not always come out exactly where I tap my pencil. If I turn jitter off, the castle will be exactly where I tap my pencil. Okay, so that's a little thing you want to do for a stamp brush. Okay, then we'll go to dynamics. We're going to skip all this other stuff. That's mostly to do rendering, wet mix, color dynamics is mostly to do with brushes that you're painting with, and you want to make painterly strokes and make them wetter or drier or things like that. But in dynamics, we want to look at some things. We have size and opacity. And if I change these, it makes my brush come out different sizes and different opacities. Let's you can clear this drawing pad if you want to see, like I made it too messy to see what's going on. So I click drawing pad and clear, then it's empty. I can also draw in different colors if I don't want to draw with black. So changing the dynamics and the opacity settings on this will change the way the overall brush works with how fast you do it, because notice it says speed. So we'll clear the drawing pad again. And if I go 1, 2, 3, 4, it does one thing. And if I go 1, 2, 3, 4, it changes more quickly. So, and you can change those what you want. Jitter basically means randomization. So it's going to randomize the size change. Instead of just getting bigger or smaller, it's going to change and be different every time you tap. So these are just things you can play with. And if you are going to be tapping multiple times with your brush, you can play with those and see what it does here and change those how you like them for what you're doing with this particular project. Okay, next thing is properties. Well, we're going to do Apple Pencil too. Let's do Apple Pencil first because it's in order. You can change what happens with the pressure of your Apple Pencil with this control. So again, I'll clear the drawing pad. If I turn the pressure setting way up, when I press lightly, I get a small house. When I press hard, I get a big house. That works just for single taps as well. A single hard tap, get a big house. A single light tap, you get a small house. So that that's what this does. So when you bring it to the right, the harder you tap, the bigger your stamp is. When you bring it to the left, where the number is negative, the harder you tap, the smaller your stamp is. So if you want to use prints or sensitivity, you can use it for opacity as well. So here, the harder I tap, the less opaque it is, or the more opaque it is, depending on which way I drag it. So here right now, light, hard. If I tap really lightly, it's very ghostly. And when transparent, if I tap hard, it's dark. So you can play with that. If you use the side of your pencil and tilt, you can do the same settings down here. For if you tilt your pencil, it might be smaller or more opaque. So you can mess with the tilt too. I don't use that very much when I create stamp brushes. It's more like something for actually painting, in my opinion. So I usually am more concerned with the Apple Pencil pressure. But if you have the Logitech pencil that works with the iPad, the tilt features work, but the pressure doesn't. So that's something you might want to play with. Okay, let's clear this one more time. And now we'll look at properties. So this is really basic stuff. You want to make sure on this, it's on the bottom, but in the list of the things they have, but properties are pretty basic to your brush, right? So use stamp preview. Make sure that's checked. What does that do? I'm going to cancel out of this and show you. This brush and this brush, it shows a line of painting. My castle brush just shows one castle. That's because it's on stamp preview. Okay. Now, did you notice that you couldn't see the whole castle? That's because the preview is way up here. So I'm going to make my preview smaller and say done. And now see, I have a small castle in there. I can see the whole castle. So go back into it. I'm going to say orient to screen. And this makes it rotate the brush when you rotate the screen. And then you can change your minimum and maximum size, minimum or maximum opacity. I usually make them pretty big. So what do those do is they set the parameters for how big you can make your brush here in the regular brush control. So like I put that way up, so now I can make a giant castle. This one, I can't make a giant castle. So I've done something very weird here. And I don't know what I did. Maybe made it just too big that it isn't really fitting on my page. And it's not stamping where I put my brush again. So go back up here. Spacing, jitter, look at dynamics. That's all straight. Apple Pencil. Made the size kind of crazy, but that's just for pressure. Properties. Okay, so now I have forgotten why my drawing is going all crazy when the shape is straight. So one thing we have is scatter in the shape. See what happens when I hit scatter? It's moving all over the place, my little samples there. What's cool is when you have something in the drawing pad and you change settings here, it changes what you're looking at. So you can see what happens. So I'm going to turn scatter off. And also it has randomized down here. I'm going to turn that off. And that's under the shape. And look, now my houses are all standing up straight. But I have orient to screen turned off. So it was going with the direction of my canvas. So you can see that when you're doing these, you have to play a little with the different settings, especially if you're starting with someone else's brush. Once you get a brush that does everything you like for a stamp brush, you just duplicate that one over and over again. So I would never go back to the blotch brush and start with that. I would start with a brush that I like, that I made myself or that I got somewhere else. But the blotch brush is built into Procreate, so you can use that as a good practice one if you don't want to get any. But what was I going to say? The handout I have does have a link to some free stamp brushes. And I would get the solid circle or a solid rectangle one from that link and use that for a starting point rather than the blotch one. It'll just, your thing won't be moving around as much and won't have some of those settings that the blotch brush has. But still, it doesn't matter what you start with. If you go into the brush studio for any stamp brush and you start with the shape, the grain, and remember the shape has settings as well for scatter, randomized, that makes it move around. The shape and the grain, the dynamics, Apple Pencil, and properties. You can do anything to it, change any features of it, and make it into a brand new stamp brush. Last thing is, in About This Brush on the very bottom, you can change the name of the brush and sign it if you want, that you made it. But you change the name of it if because when you duplicate a brush, it adds a 1 to it. So if you keep duplicating the same brush, you'll get circle 1 1, circle 1 1 1, circle 1 1 1 1. And then eventually, if you have made a picture of a castle, you don't want it called circle 1 1 1 1. You want the brush name to be castle. Maybe that doesn't matter to you because you just look for the picture that you want, and that's fine too. You don't have to rename them. So let's see. Helen says, this is crazy. How did you learn all these things? I took a lot of Skillshare classes on Procreate. I signed up for Skillshare by accident for a year. I meant to sign up for a month. I signed up for a year. So I just kept doing classes in Procreate and Skillshare since I had already paid for the year. Carol, you had a question?
I do, thank you. So I've got my iPad open to Brush Studio, and the blotch, and then I open settings where it says I could clear my drawing pad. And then right below that, it says reset all brush settings. How
Yeah.
global is that? Is that when it says reset all brush settings? What do they mean by all? What am I doing if I press that?
Which thing were you in?
The drawing pad one up above, where you click on that one. Yeah, see how it says reset all brush settings? What are they
If you go,
referring to?
yeah, if you go to about this brush, you
Uh-huh.
can create a new reset point for your brush.
Okay,
So you can say, save this brush. It's how I want it. And then you can
Okay.
reset the brush. And that's a permanent thing.
Mhm.
But if you're in the shape, I mean, in the drawing panel, I'm
Yeah.
not 100% sure, but I believe that it's just what you did right now.
Right
It
in
doesn't go
there.
back to any previously saved versions. It just goes back to what was there when you opened this.
Okay,
So like, say I wanted to try randomize and I didn't like it, I would say, okay, what if yeah, I don't know what it's grayed out on mine even. So I'm not sure what that does.
I will not do anything with it then.
Or just
Okay.
try it on one when you're just
Yeah.
messing around. But right now on mine, it's grayed out. So it doesn't even give me an option to use that.
Mhm.
It could be if you change colors and stuff, but I don't know, sorry.
Huh, thank
I'm
you.
gonna pop in here because I made a mistake and I can't find where I duplicated the blotch.
It
And
would be
so-
right in the, okay, blotch is in the
No,
water.
no, this is what I'm saying. So I just went and did what whoever was talking said about resetting the brush.
Oh, okay.
I duplicated my stamp and then I went back and reset to the blotch and it came
Turned back
back
into
to the
the
blotch.
blotch. Okay,
Yes.
okay, thank you. So be careful with that because you might lose everything that you were doing.
Oh, I
and
thought
if
I thought I lost my blotch brush and I was like, well,
Oh,
I would
yeah,
never
yeah.
use that. So
Always duplicate the brush and mess around with the duplicate. That way you still have your original.
I thought I did
Yeah.
duplicate it, but I
Mhm.
guess I didn't.
Yeah. Okay, so the reset worked for you. Good.
Mhm.
Susan, you have your hand up?
Yeah, so I'm looking in your handout for the link to the stamps that you provided,
Right.
and that looks like that was a discussion message over in the Procreate folio. That's kind of the
Right.
Procreate support
Right.
community. It's a really good resource if I get stuck, and I'll look there or I'll ask Donna. But it looks like they're all pretty solid stamped geometric shapes.
Right.
And I was
right.
wondering if you know of any, or if you might be willing to share a couple of yours where you've got them modified so that they twist and
Oh,
turn and
sure.
change size. And otherwise I can post in the group also. I was telling Donna before we got started today that Ite Monero, who makes brushes and gives, like once a week, he gives you a little free package. And he had some heart stamps, and it was basically he had 5 stamps that all used the same image, so that like we did the first part of the thing, and you're able to see how he made the brush settings so that they twirl or don't twirl or bleed or don't bleed. So I can share that.
please.
I can share that.
He said that was only available for 48 hours. So
I
I'm not sure if it's still
grabbed
there,
them.
but if you
Yeah,
can
no, I
share
don't
them
know.
with us, great. And I will share some of mine as well. The ones that I put in the handout are good starting points because they're nice and plain. So if you import one of, you might want to use them because you just want a stamp of a circle or a square. I have stamps of plain shapes too, but they're really good starting points to duplicate and create your own brush because they're so plain. And then all the extras are things you add instead of starting with something like blotch. And then they have all these extra features that you have to find and take away.
Right.
Either
right.
way works, but yeah. Yeah. Any other questions?
I have a general question. When
Mhm.
you are making these, how do you make another category in the brush library? Like if I
Oh,
want to
sure.
and pull things and then pull things into it. If I hit this plus here and it says untitled set, I can just type stamps in there. But
Right.
how do I pull my stamps I've made
Okay.
and other things into that untitled set?
That's a good question. So we have this
Oh,
brush
it says
library, and you can see I have a ton of brush folders in here. The ones that have little pictures on them, like this elements, organic, recent, those are ones that Procreate put there. And the ones with this little tilde or Procreate label are ones that I either created or imported. So we want to make a new brush. We want to make a new brush and folder. We just click the brush on the top, click plus. Whoops, that's to add a new brush.
No, it's there. It's right in the
It's
brush.
yeah, you scroll, you pull it down, and there's the plus. That's
Right.
to add a new folder. It says untitled set. You can name it whatever you want. And how do you get brushes in it? That was the question. So I'm going to just go over here, and I have these brushes. I'm going to duplicate one because I don't want to move the original. So any brush you want to put in the untitled set, and it can be more than one. So I can take two brushes. So to select more than one, I touch one and then swipe right on the other. And then I drag them to the untitled set. When it opens, I drag them over there into the area and let go. And now my untitled set has those brushes in them.
Okay, let me see if I can do that.
So it's just dragging stuff around. And thank you, Laura. I should have done this at the very beginning. I did not have the captioning on, and I have to make sure that I guess my Procreate account has it turned on by default because I thought it was, but apparently it was not. So I will figure that out before our next session.
Oh, it's working. It's working.
Oh, it.
Yeah. And
But I
just
don't think
meant
it
for
was
you to
on. I'm
share
not
your-
sure if it was on before.
Oh, okay. I just meant for you to share your screen while you were just explaining how to.
Oh gosh, I didn't spotlight it.
Right.
Okay.
We were looking at you.
Right. You can always go in the recording, you can't do this, but you can always go into the view on Zoom and say speaker view. But of course, I have two accounts on, so let's just redo this. So spotlight this for everybody, and I'll just show you again. If you want to add a brush library in Procreate, you click on the brush in the menu here, drag down on that left and click a plus. It makes a new set called Untitled Set, and you can rename it whatever you want. Now we want to put a couple of brushes in it. So I'll go to a different folder that has brushes, and I'm going to duplicate a couple of brushes. So I duplicated this one. So now it's selected, and if I swipe right, I can select more than one. And I can do this, with as many as I want, but I only want two right now. Then I press and hold, drag them to Untitled Set, wait for it to open, drag them to the area inside Untitled Set, and let go. If you just let go when you're pointing at Untitled Set, they won't move. You have to be patient, drag them into this column, and then they're in there. And of course, you can do that more than once. I can take this one from this Untitled Set and drag it into this one. You don't have to drag things just into an empty set. You can make, bring things anytime you want. You can copy and move brushes from brush set to brush set. So
Okay.
that's everything I had for doing the stamp brushes. So in the Mighty Network and in YouTube, when we get the video uploaded, I'll make sure we include the links to the handout and the a couple brushes that I mentioned. Yeah.
Thanks, Donna. This is great.
Oh, yeah, yeah. I'm gonna play with this, and my problem is I never can remember what I did where. I almost need to record step by step what I'm doing as I
Well,
do.
keep
I
notes.
remember it.
Keep notes on a piece of paper, or you can also write notes on a layer inside your Procreate file, and then, you know, hide that layer when you're working on the art, but you can keep notes
did.
inside it. Mhm.
Like my Procreate file. That way I could find it.
Right, then you know the notes are in that spot, yes. And I did have the step-by-step handout that goes through all the things I did here in order. Of
Oh,
course, you
yeah,
can watch
this
it again once
great.
the video's up. Yeah.
This has been
So-
great. I appreciate this so.
It's fun for me too. So, and you guys always have something that I didn't think of or didn't see before either. So it's a learning for me too. So
And where
It-
is
it'd be
the, where's the link gonna be?
when we post the videos, they
Ah,
go to the YouTube channel of SAW, and we also post it in the Mighty Network under the Procreate topic. And the links will be in there in both places.
Okay, thank you so much. I came late.
All
And
right.
that's where we'll put the brushes, and it would be really fun if when we practice with these, if people would put a copy of what they drew and what they use their brushes for, just so we can see. Because sometimes I think this is a really cool tool, but I don't really know how or where I would use it, and how you guys use your brushes will probably give me some
Yeah,
ideas of
yeah.
things to do.
I will share some of my pages from my comics too that I use stamp brushes in, so you can see what I did with them.
So
Oh,
on
yeah.
this one, the bird up in the upper left, right, up on the left-hand corner is a
The
stamp.
bird's
Yes,
a stamp and the fish is a stamp.
but the hippo is not.
The hippo is not. I could make a stamp out of it, but I didn't.
Right.
Yeah. Just the birds and the fish. And you can see that I have the setting on the bird, so the bird turns around. I didn't flip them or anything. I just click, click, clicked, and they came up different sizes and facing different directions because I set that up in the brush settings.
Can you make a stamp that inherently, what do I want to say, carries the color with it? Like, for instance, could you make a stamp of your face, you know, that little, your avatar?
No, I don't think so. All the
Because it has to be
brushes
black
have
and white.
all the brushes have black and white or grayscale, and the textures. Yeah, so you could make a stamp of the outlines of your face. You know, the line, the inking. But I don't think there's any way you could add a texture to it. So but it would be black and white. But I could save the painting of my face separate from the inking and make that the grain for the brush. But I'd have to make it, as far as I know, I'd have to make it black and white, so it wouldn't be colorized.
Interesting.
Now there are color features for brushes that we didn't look at. I've never used them for stamp brushes. I've only used them for like watercolor brushes and things. But there are features in the brush studio for changing colors dynamically. So it's possible someone could figure out how to do something like that, but not me.
How did you do then? How did your birds get that color in your
I
face?
just picked that color in the color palette, like any
Oh,
other
okay.
brush. Yeah.
I
Carol?
have a question, Donna. Thank you. So when you're saying pure black and pure white, can I just go to the very edge of my color wheel or color palette and that will get
Yes.
me there? Or is there
So
a secret?
in the square one,
Right.
classic one, it's the lower
Right.
left and upper left corners for pure black
need
and
to
pure
go-
white.
Do I need to go to classic to get that? For
No,
real?
you can be in the disc and you can
Okay.
double click in this corner and it will go to
Mhm.
pure black. And if you double click over here, it goes to pure white.
Okay.
Yeah, so
Thank
you can
you.
be in either way. And of course,
Okay.
if you have it saved in a palette, that if you have a palette that has pure black
Yeah.
and pure white in it, you can pick it right out of there.
Oh, okay, great. Thank
So
you.
you can make a black and white palette just for that. Save those
Mhm.
and use the palette.
Great. You're teaching us all magic. Thank you.
Yes.
I love
Yeah.
Procreate. Yeah. So,
I
so
think
yeah,
my,
there's like 100 ways to do anything. So anything I show you is the way that I have figured out to do it or learned from someone else. But if you figure out another way, that's okay too. Because these software programs are so rich in features that there's many ways to do the same thing to get the same kind of result. There's usually many ways to get the same kind of result. So, okay,
Thank you so much, Donna. It's been
Thank
great.
I
Thank
will.
you.
You're welcome. Thank you all for coming, and I'll see you all on the Mighty Network and around.
thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.
Thank you.
Bye.